The first target in any protracted military campaign is pretty much always infrastructure. When the U.S. invaded Iraq with a shock and awe strategy, we hit the bridges right away. We did the same thing in Yugoslavia, Vietnam, Korea. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If you shut down transportation, you shut down the country. The purpose of taking out bridges and airports isn't to convince anyone that you're right. It's not a moral argument. The point is to disable your enemy as quickly as possible and to make them vulnerable to further attack. And after what happened yesterday, it's clear that the domestic enemies of the United States, the ones we've imported and that our universities have indoctrinated, understand the importance of infrastructure very well. In a series of coordinated attacks, Hamas sympathizers stormed bridges and airports all over the country. And I'm going to go through several of these attacks, and I'll start with by far the most significant and the longest lasting interruption. It took place on both the Golden Gate Bridge and Interstate 880 in Oakland. Watch.
Another protest turned the morning commute into a parking lot, leaving many drivers angry and asking what will stop these from happening. Outside of a ceasefire in Gaza, what can be done to prevent major traffic arteries from getting shut down for hours?
It has been actions such as these that people have been taking across the world that have actually been moving the needle.
Woods Irvin wasn't involved in today's protest, but was one of the demonstrators who shut down the Bay Bridge in November. Hospitals say in that case, several organ donations were delayed because of the backup. 78 people were arrested and charged, but all avoided jail time, agreeing to the court's diversion program where they would have to complete 5 hours of community service each.
So just a month ago, activists shut down the Bay Bridge, and as you just heard, they delayed several organ donations. The San Francisco Chronicle reported that at least one person had a medical emergency while he was stuck in traffic, but nothing happened to any of the people responsible for that. They got something like 5 hours of community service. So yesterday, it happened again, and this time on the Golden Gate Bridge and the interstate. News reports like the one you just saw always say that protesters are shutting down traffic, and that is accurate. But it only tells part of the story. The other part is that the political leaders in these cities are also choosing to shut down traffic by allowing the protesters to do this. Now, it would be exceedingly easy to not only clear these blockades, but also dissuade anyone else from ever pulling a stunt like this again. All you have to do is pull them off the road by force and then hit them with every criminal charge even vaguely applicable, including terrorism charges. Just throw the whole book, the entire book, at just one of these people, or a lot more than one would be my preference, but just one is all it would take. One person, one time, and it will never happen again. Give one of them prison time, real prison time, like 15 years of prison time, and the problem is solved forever, just like that. Nobody will ever shut down a road in this country ever again. Instead, the authorities in California are doing the opposite. They gave these criminals a few hours of community service the last time they did it, and this time they let them shut down one of the longest bridges in the country for 5 hours before making a single arrest. I mean, why wait 5 hours if you're going to make the arrest anyway? Why not do it in 5 minutes? Why not do it in 60 seconds? All told, 38 people were ultimately arrested between the Golden Gate Bridge and the Oakland Interstate, and they were hit with a variety of charges from false imprisonment to unlawful assembly. None of these charges, it's important to point out, carry a potential sentence of over a decade in prison. Because that kind of penalty in this country is now reserved for pro-life demonstrators who pray outside of abortion clinics and allegedly block access to the abortion facility. Now, if you do that, as we've seen, you get the pre-dawn SWAT team raid from the DOJ and a very good chance that you spend the next 10 years in prison. But if you sit on the highway for 5 hours and prevent thousands of people from getting where they need to go, then it's not a big deal, apparently. In fact, false imprisonment is the most serious charge that any of these demonstrators face, and the max you can get for that in California is something like 4 years. And of course, it's virtually certain that they're not going to serve that time of 4 years or even go to trial for any of this. They'll get community service probably, and then they'll be out doing the same thing again a month from now or 2 months from now. And that's odd, even by the Biden administration's own logic, because for all we know, there might have been people on these roads who were headed to get abortions. Imagine that. And they were delayed or even blocked from doing so. Will the DOJ look into the number of Californians who had to reschedule their abortions yesterday because their bridge was illegally shut down? Think of how many children might still be alive because of these protesters. Think about how many opportunities to murder babies were squandered. That's the kind of thing that normally keeps Merrick Garland up at night. Now, if pro-lifers deserve a decade in prison for mildly inconveniencing people who are trying to access one abortion clinic in Nashville, then that means that these people deserve a century in prison. But of course, they're on the left, so they can literally do whatever they want all the time. Logic doesn't really apply. There will be no DOJ probe into the organizers of this protest. There will be no RICO case against them. Yet increasingly, it's clear that there should be. According to San Francisco's local news station, KRON, a woman named Ellen Caminiti was one of the organizers of the Golden Gate protest yesterday. She was apparently off-site serving as a representative. And I looked her up, and it turns out that she's the communications director at a nonprofit called the National Center for Lesbian Rights, or NCLR. So this is an organization that gets tax breaks to advance lesbian rights. And at 9 a.m. on Monday, their communications director was organizing a criminal blockade of one of the most important bridges in the country. Now, one of my producers reached out to Ellen Caminiti about this, and she said, quote, NCLR had no role in it. That is just my day job, which is completely separate from this. Now, what's confusing about that, again, is that, she says it was her day job. Well, this blockade took place first thing Monday morning, which counts, you would think, as during the day. So it sounds like Ellen Caminiti's day job is shutting down infrastructure in San Francisco in the name of Palestinian solidarity. We followed up with NCLR to ask them about this, and we wanted to know if they had any reaction whatsoever to their employee assisting in a criminal blockade during the workday. They didn't respond to that question, not surprisingly. All they said is that they had nothing to do with the blockade. Now, you'd think that if NCLR disagreed with what their employee did during work hours, they would fire her immediately. At the very least, they would condemn what she did, especially given that she did it on behalf of Hamas, which is a group that would happily toss everyone in their organization off of a rooftop. But no such luck. That's because NCLR, like many so-called left-wing public interest nonprofits, isn't really working in the public interest at all, of course. It's a tax shelter that employs unhinged activists who want to destroy this country. They should lose their tax-exempt nonprofit status immediately. Nonprofits aren't supposed to have anything remotely to do with criminal activity, and it definitely sounds like, at a minimum, they're tacitly endorsing exactly that. But of course, there's not going to be any DOJ investigation, at least not under the Biden administration, because the Biden administration wants these kinds of blockades to occur. That's why they took place all day yesterday, all over the country. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like leaving your keys in the car while you run into the gas station for a snack. Most of the time, you're probably fine, but what if you come back to see someone else driving your car? Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, or airports, any hacker on the same network can gain access to your personal data, such as your passwords and financial details. It doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone, and hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal info on the dark web. ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so no one can steal sensitive data. I love how easy ExpressVPN is to use. All I need to do is fire up the app and click one button to get protected. Plus, it works on all devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure on the go. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Walsh. That's expressvpn.com/Walsh. And you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/Walsh. In Seattle, demonstrators blocked access to the airport, forcing travelers to walk to the terminal. In New York, they stormed the Brooklyn Bridge. In Chicago, they blocked the highway leading to O'Hare Airport. In Dearborn, Michigan, a caravan of Hamas sympathizers backed up traffic. In Fremont, California, they attacked a Tesla production facility, apparently because of Elon Musk's tweets that they were upset about, forcing the plant to declare an emergency and close. Now, in all of these cases, except for the situation in Fremont, there wasn't much of a police response, at least not initially. In Seattle, officers eventually arrested the people blockading the roadway. Julio Rosas reports that on the Brooklyn Bridge, the NYPD made an effort to stop the demonstrators and succeeded in stopping about half of them, but traffic was still disrupted. As far as I can tell, the only decisive reaction to these riots took place, not surprisingly, in Florida, in Miami, Florida specifically, where police hauled away the demonstrators the moment they broke the law. Watch. Well, look at that. The police just dragged them away. That's it. It's not hard. Takes a few minutes, and that's it. Problem solved, and the whole city isn't held hostage by a handful of terrorists. Just throw them in jail and make an example of them. Governor Ron DeSantis' communications director uploaded the footage you just saw, along with this message, quote, "In Florida, we drag these people out of the road and arrest them," which is obviously the right response, as rare as it may be. And when police don't do this immediately, then citizens have every right to do it themselves. I mean, every moral right to do it themselves. As Senator Tom Cotton put it, quote, "I encourage people who get stuck behind the pro-Hamas mobs blocking traffic, take matters into your own hands to get them out of the way. It's time to put an end to this nonsense." Now, of course, morally, to stipulate morally, you have every right to do that. The problem with what Tom Cotton said, and the problem with him encouraging people to do that, is that if somebody does take matters into their own hands, even though they are totally morally justified in doing so, if they do, there's a very good chance, we all know, they'll spend the rest of their life in prison. Okay, we've seen people that clearly, I mean, look at, the Daniel Penny situation. I mean, we've seen people clearly acting in self-defense, in defense of the community, against individuals who are violent and erratic, and they either go to prison or the court tries to put them in prison. So imagine something like this in this situation. Well, the Biden DOJ will destroy whoever tries to do that. They'll do nothing to protect innocent people from these terrorists. But the moment someone tries to take action, even if it's morally justified, then the feds will hunt them down. You know, it's almost like that's what the Biden administration wants to happen at this point. It's almost like that's exactly why they aren't enforcing the law here, why they are allowing these terrorists to do this. It appears to be what they want in New York. Yesterday, police officers didn't have much of a reaction when a Hamas sympathizer lit an American flag on fire and shouted "Death to America" right in front of about 5 cops. He just did that and walked away casually. Watch.
Oh, shit! Yeah, shit! Death to America! Yo, somebody arrest him. Who did that? Why you did the flag? No. Who did that? Anyone have that on video? Yo, anybody have that on video? Anybody have that on video? Who did that flag? You get that?
Now, this is something of an aside, but if you call yourself America First, and of course a lot of people do now, it goes without saying that you should be stridently opposed to people who shout "Death to America," burn American flags, and go out of their way to cause problems for American citizens, for regular American citizens who are just trying to get to work on a Monday morning. If your America First principles somehow find common cause with people who wish death on America and its people, then that's a good indication that you are at best very confused. But that confusion needs to end at this point, because this is well past the realm of online trolling. There are now coordinated attacks occurring all over the country targeting our infrastructure. You know, you hear a lot of people say, when we see things like this. They say, well, why would people do this? They're not going to convince anyone to support their cause by blocking traffic or shutting down the airport. Well, yeah. That's because the objective of Hamas sympathizers living in this country, it's not to convince you of anything. They're not trying to persuade you. Disrupting infrastructure, as always, is just the first phase in a much larger campaign that they have planned. And unless more states follow Florida's lead and shut this down immediately, then very soon we'll find out what the next phase is. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.